Hey there, friends. I'm continuing a video that I just finished, kind of a long one, up to 25 minutes, that one, and I haven't even though I've uploaded it to YouTube, I haven't watched it yet because I'm on a roll. I was talking 2 videos ago about what I call virtualizing nations, by which I mean it's kind of like empathy, right? It's like, can you be in my shoes and see the whole world through my eyes? And can I be in your shoes and see the whole world through your eyes? But I'm taking it to another level and pretending that I could see the whole world through the eyes of the United States and what that looks like. And then I could switch and look at the whole world through the eyes of Russia, or look at the whole world through the eyes of Iran. And I think the promised land is planet Earth. We're all on the same spaceship. We're all in the same global university. And we want intelligence to triumph over conditioned reflexes. And I think as we fall back into sort of um, if cruelty is on the rise, that's an indication that we're not using our intelligence. Now, when I look through the eyes of Iran, what used to be called Persia, I somewhat take them at their word that they don't want nuclear weapons. They're in support of the nuclear weapons ban. They do want nuclear energy because that's something that contemporary nations want to have. France has huge amounts. Big industrial nations do have nuclear energy, whether we like it or not. I'm not saying that's the future, that we're always going to have that, but for now. So I do understand that Iran wants nuclear energy. What I'm curious about, though, in that when the Trump administration pulled out of the Iran deal and talks about how they want a better deal, why don't we ever hear about what that better deal would be? Instead of this siege, which is what's going on right now, we call it sanctions. It's really a siege warfare. Very dark ages, very middle ages. When Descartes was free and footloose and going around Europe, he would go and hang out and see what a siege was like. He would pitch his tent and sort of offer himself as a consultant, and him and his valet would go from siege to siege and see what was going on there. That guy was pretty alienated. He just wanted to be left alone to think a lot of the time. He ended up, as you know, maybe in Sweden as an advisor to the Queen there, but he was not popular because he was in a different religious lineage. People aren't sure what lineage to put him in. Was he a Rosicrucian? Whatever. Anyway, if I were Iran, though, I would be taking my geometric heritage and looking at the concentric hierarchy here, the whole number volumes, and making it clear that this looks like curriculum for us. Ditto in Russia. There's nothing specifically, I call it American heritage, but it's world heritage. And by whole number volumes, that's really code at this point for this set of memes relating to positive futurism. So Iran, I believe, wants a nuclear-free world, and their better leverage in terms of political leverage is to push that, and they do. It's not like I think they're being hypocritical because actually it's not to their advantage to make themselves a target. If there were proof positive that they had nuclear weapons, this would be all the more reason to attack, right? It's kind of like when you're playing poker and you want the other guy to go for the gun so that you can shoot him. You've got your reason now. It's like, oh, you went for the gun, I had to shoot you in self defense. Attacking Iraq, that was done in the name of self defense, even though Iraq was not behind 9/11. Now, I use the word Iraq knowing that it doesn't really mean anything in the sense that we throw these words around as if these were actual people that had a will, kind of like corporations have personhood. Iraq is inert, it's a word on paper. So, it's a bit of a shorthand, isn't it? London thinks, New York thinks. We have all of these ways of ascribing agency in English grammar to inert objects. But that's, I guess you could call it a shorthand. So if I were Iran, I would be very loud about not wanting my nuclear weapons because I don't need them. And I'm all for a positive future. I think China is looking through Chinese eyes, the build out of infrastructure. I think that was smart, and I think there's a lot we can build on from the Chinese point of view in terms of what we're trying to accomplish. Somehow the world game idea of a global grid got pushed onto the Chinese, I think to further delay making that an acceptable topic, just like I was showing in my earlier um, talk from the OSCON about how we're suspicious of anyone talking about the grid in any coherent manner unless they're authorized to do so, because a lot of sort of quote unquote mimetic landmines have been put into that um, discourse. And I'm talking about Russiagate and stuff like that. I'm pulling up what I mean from my World Game Museum. I'm pulling up what I'm talking about. Actually, this is not the essay, but the one about Russiagate. Let's scroll through this. You'll know what I'm talking about. For some reason, the Russiagate essay is always linked from this one. I don't know why. That's a pretty scary picture, right? Well done, though, as I said. So, in other words, I'm looking for empathy when I talk about virtualizing nations. I'm talking about both empathy and transparency and understanding. Because it's hard to empathize with the United States when we don't know what it is they want. It seems like at this talk on the California grid and what we need to do to improve it, the speakers made various digs at the Germans and the German grid and implied that maybe it was a big mistake to be trying to get more natural gas from Russia. That wasn't a clear branch of that conversation. I might have asked questions, but the talk went right up to the end. I think because it was being recorded and would become part of the public record, I think they'd kind of decided they didn't want questions. Q&A is too uncontrolled, so the talk went right up to the end. I didn't bother with any questions. But what was that about? Where we're like trying to again make make economic life unviable for Russia or for Germany or for Iran. I was just seeing in Medium another essay, overpopulation is not the big scary thing now. They're worried about underpopulation. Replacement levels, we've gone below replacement levels in many countries, and now they're saying how low can it go? And like now they're going to worry about underpopulation after generations of screaming about overpopulation. I don't think our ideologies that are motivating us to be stupid and attack each other and lay siege with terrible consequences, siege of Venezuela, siege of Iran, all of this sort of, we have to strangle you. It's like everybody in the room has their hands around everyone else's neck and everyone's squeezing and everyone's running out of air. And it just seems kind of ridiculous. And when are we going to start to look back on this chapter and realize how counterproductive it was? And when are we going to take up the mantle of positive futurism? Because what other kind of futurism can we really live on? I mean, it's cool to look at dark, foreboding, dystopian futures like Real Player One or Blade Runner or all these, and Hollywood is being really good at that, giving us dark futures, 12 Monkeys. So if that's all we have in our head, is it any wonder that 2 out of 3 Americans think things are going from bad to worse? That was a statistic I heard at OSCON. The hope is draining away, and that's what's dangerous, right? If you don't have hope, then you rally into these pathological structures. These fascisms are the natural consequence of draining away hope. And I'm saying it's way too early in this game, world game, to be sucking all the hope out. And so please, let's get some more information about what it is that strangulation's all about. These terms, socialism versus capitalism, these get bandied about, but really it's a globe, it's a planet fueled by solar power. It's whether the grid is getting its majority of its energy from solar panels, it's not at the moment, nor from windmills. But if you count agriculture, the oceans, basically, if we weren't bathed in sunlight hour by hour, we would disappear, right? This would be a cold, forbidding planet, more like Mars, or we could go like Venus or something. The planet could be unlivable, right? We could have nuclear winter, we could do all that terrible stuff to ourselves. And Bucky, he said he wasn't an optimist, that he was a realist. And maybe it wasn't likely maybe, but then he thought maybe it was that we could get through this. But for him, it was touch and go, right? It's not like let's take for granted that we're going to make it through this final exam period, right? But what do we need to do? And I think coming from the future, looking back and thinking in terms of terraforming our own planet, well, what did we do? We got a better discourse going, talking realistically about energy needs and what we were going to do around that, and creating more compassion for refugees of all kinds, not just any one particular group, because in a way there's just a massive amount of refugees waiting to happen. I think we need to think about evacuating Gaza. People who want to get out of there should be able to get out of there. Where can they go, right? What can we create in place? The Middle East, if it's going to be a hellhole, then maybe we need to get people out of there, right? Just like happened in Libya after it got bombed. Again, things got more uncivilized because my dad worked for the Libyan government even through the Gaddafi years, and it was all about 50-year plans and zoning and making a nice world there for Libya. And then it all went to hell. I'm kind of glad my dad didn't get to see all that. He didn't even see 9/11. It would have been disappointing, probably, and for certain, to see Libya destroyed that way. Why do we destroy, when the whole point is we need to make the world work? So these setbacks, any attack by any nation against any nation is a setback. And we need to understand what the thinking is behind that better. What is the rationale? I don't think it's being explained, and the sense that they're just hitting our emotion buttons and trying to make us angry at the right people for ulterior motives, that's starting to not work as well because our literacy has improved, our vocabulary has gone up, and it's gotten to where unless people can explain their position in great detail, they don't really get as much of a hearing. And I think that goes for politicians as much as anyone. So you'll notice here that I am not preaching anti any particular religion, and I'm expressing compassion for the people of Iran, and I'm apologetic. You'll see in my other videos for not apologetic for me personally because I'm an Oregonian against BDS versus Iran. I'm against siege. I don't think that's the way to make change. And what is it that the Trump administration really wants from Iran? To not have nuclear energy? Is that what they want? Has that ever been spelled out? What is the end goal? We're always told that the Iran deal was a terrible deal. What is the deal that they want instead? I think it has to do with what, actually? Is it allowing British petroleum back in the country? Is that what that's about? And is that what's going on in Venezuela? Is this really all about British petroleum? BP? Sometimes I think that's what's going on. But it's hard to know. And I feel like the people don't sense that they're included in the loop at all. They're just being expected to be the extras, the cheering masses. the marginalized, just boo and go yay on cue, like at a rally. Just express emotion, not thought. And YouTube is a place we can have thoughts. So I'm here, as you can see, I'm just scrolling through my YouTube history saying, hey, I put a lot of thought into here. Now what? Like, how do we go from this to actual making the movies? Because I think in this day and age, to go forward means to make a media production out of whatever it is we're doing. Not just, short little ads, not just sound bites, but actual films with scripts and storyboards. So, who's going to help? Hollywood? Hollywood, are you out there? Hello. 1, 2, 3, Hollywood. Are you out there? Okay, and now back to quadres a little bit. I'm going to go back to something more technical after that. I'll call it a rant. Remember, in Quakers, we have ranters and quietists. And these are more modes. You can be in rant mode or quiet mode. Quiet mode is reflection, attending to spirit, being being worshipful is how we put that in Quakerism, right? But that may not be your language. But meditative. So this was more of a rant. So anyway, back to Q vectors. What's a little bit interesting about these is let's take the length. So I've created all these Q vectors. I've got a length method on each one of them because they're all of the same type. And wow, I call them basis vectors, but strangely enough, they are not unit length. Also, we talk about vector addition, right, last time. So to add a vector is just to go like this and go tail to tip, tail to tip, right? I was showing that last time. So what is it to subtract a vector? Well, as you know from group theory and all kinds of other math, or maybe you don't know, but to to subtract is simply to add the negative of. So when I want to do this vector minus this other vector, all I do is add the negative of the second vector, which means I can go back, I can do like this, right? So I'm going to do this vector minus this vector. So the first thing I do with minus is I reverse the direction. 180 degrees, points the other way, and then it's tail to tip, tail to tip. So I'm going to end up down here. I'm going to end up kind of get this distance. Instead of getting this longer distance, that's the sum, I'm getting the difference across. So A minus B is going to be the same length, right? I can move this vector in different places. And therefore, given quadres, I can go A minus B, and that will be the edge of my unit vector tetrahedron, right? I can add and subtract these vectors. A and B are vector type objects. So when I do A minus B, what am I really doing? I'm looking at the length of any one of these tetrahedron edges. And what's that going to give me? So let's take a look. 1. So the unit vectors, so-called, are not unit vectors. They're basis vectors, but they're not units. We're using the edges of the tetrahedron as 1 so that the volume of our tetrahedron is also 1. And if that sounds wrong to you, how could a regular tetrahedron of edges 1 have volume 1? Again, that's what all kinds of YouTubes are about. That's at the core of synergetics, and that's where the whole number volumes are coming from when we talk about 1, 1, 3, 4, 6, 20. And if we click on the synergetics link here in Wikipedia, you'll find a longer volumes table with a lot more detail, plus the breakdown into A, B, and T modules. So if I'm in Iran or Israel or Russia, and I'm interested in reaching out to people in America who have a positive futurism going, here's a place to start, right? So, and I don't think there's time to do some little obscure little essay in a math journal somewhere. I think we need to start to see on YouTube other teachers besides me, right? Because it's all pretty hopeless if it's just this one little AA battery. And it's not all just me, right? Fuller's super famous. These books are all published. That's why I feel like it's not a waste of time to try to ride that horse because it's well established. It's all this work got done before I was even in the picture. And so I'm like, why start from scratch? Why start all over? Why bomb ourselves back into the Stone Age and then try to rebuild? That's dumb, right? So, hello out there. If you're able to hear this and want to join forces in creating a better planet, especially if you're a math teacher or a history teacher, it's the curriculum that we need to be looking at. And the curriculum these days is something visual, it's something on YouTube or one of these others. It's not buried in some very obscure journal somewhere. But that means sticking your neck out. And this is where I think people have qualms. And my goal in all these videos is to say there's nothing mathematically wrong with any of this. And I've been pushing this for like decades. And no one's ever written to me and showed me where the math is wrong. It's more like, why do we care about polyhedrons? They're so retro, you know, and Fuller was a failure. The car flipped over and all this kind of weird sort of non-response, right? So, or Fuller's too verbose. Synergetics is too long. These are kind of non-arguments. I think Frank Zubek is my only public detractor on YouTube. So if you want to figure out whether I should be considered a crackpot, watch Frank Zubek's videos because he's the only one who's found fault with all of this stuff in detail. And I think he's just confused in my view. So check it out. And if you think this stuff makes sense, maybe say something. It's in Wikipedia. It's published everywhere. You're not really taking a risk anymore. The big risk is in not talking about this stuff. That's where the big risk is. The status quo is unsustainable. All right, talk to you soon.